So, when evolutionary biologists are building phylogenetic trees, we always start with basic taxonomy. And we recall from Learning Activity 6.1 that taxonomy, Linnaean taxonomy, it literally translates as arrangement law. But it's the science of classifying organisms to construct internationally shared classification systems, with each organism being placed into increasingly more inclusive groups, right? As we go from species, genus, all the way up to kingdoms and domains. We also discussed in the last learning activity how the African leopard is a member of the Felidae family, the cat family, which is part of a larger order known as the Carnivora. So let's take a closer look at this mammalian order. This is obviously clearly a very simplified tree. It just shows a handful of lineages in the order Carnivora, but we can see the relative relatedness of the leopard and the cat family relative to two other families in the order Carnivora, the mustelids and the canids. The mustelids, this is the weasel family. So this is going to include things like the wolverine, the pine marten, the fisher, the badger, the otters. And then this family down here, the Canidae, so this is the wolf dog family, also includes foxes and coyotes. So how do we read this thing? So what this phylogenetic tree is telling me is that the mustelids, the weasels, and the canids share a more recent common ancestor than they do with the felids. So we've got to go all the way back really to the base of the Carnivora phylogenetic tree to find a common ancestor between the leopard and the gray wolf. Okay, so this is how we read these things. Number two, this is showing us that the coyote and the gray wolf, they share a very recent common ancestor. And as such, they're members of the same genus, Canis. Okay. We even see hybridization between coyotes and gray wolves, which when we talked about the evolution of new species, we talked about how sometimes gene pools don't completely get enough separation, and when they come together, we can still see hybridization, which suggests a recent common ancestor. Okay, a little bit of terminology that I want you to have a handle on because it's going to show up on your next assessment. Closely related species like the coyote and the gray wolf that share a recent common ancestor, these are known as sister taxa. So taxa is when we're talking about multiple lineages. A taxon is a single lineage. And so with that in mind, the basal taxon, in this case, it's down here. The basal taxon is the oddball. So it is the most distantly related lineage relative to all the other lineages on the phylogenetic tree. The basal taxon is actually really important as a point of comparison. Also, it's going to help us root the tree relative to the larger phylogenetic tree of life. Okay, so here's a real world phylogenetic tree that I grabbed from my Life History of Mammals class that I teach at Arizona State University. But this is going to represent the class Mammalia. Okay, so this is all of the mammals. And so I want to start with the basal taxon, the oddball. Can you see which lineage is most distantly related? So this one right up here. These are the monotremes. So this is a very deep split In the mammals, so it probably occurred 200 or more million years ago. But the monotremes, the only extant ones left, are the duck-billed platypus and the echidna. And these are very, very unique mammals because they lay eggs among a whole other host of really crazy characteristics. And then another deep split that we see between the mammals occurs some 185 million years ago. And that's the split between the marsupials and the placentals. So you and I, as primates, are placental mammals. What that means is when we were in utero, we were nourished by a placenta, this interface between mom and the baby that she's carrying. Okay, the placenta is going to provide nourishment and take away waste. The marsupials have a very different strategy. So their young are born very underdeveloped, very altricial, and these tiny little, be it kangaroos or wombats, they're going to crawl around and they're going to enter a pouch called a marsupium. And there they're going to suckle at a teat and develop in this pouch. We're going to talk more about mammals when we talk about the vertebrates, when we do our diversity of life survey. But this is a real world phylogenetic tree. The other thing I'll point out, lastly, is when we start to map out who's related to who using molecular systematics, sometimes some very curious relationships emerge. And so, as an example, this is the elephants right here, and then the Hyracoideae are the hyraxes. So, if you look here, the most recent common ancestor to the African and Asian elephants, which are the only elephants that are still around today. The woolly mammoth is gone, along with a whole host of other really cool elephants. But the most closely related mammals on planet Earth today to elephants are these adorable little creatures over here, the hyraxes, like the rock hyrax. So super interesting when we study evolutionary relationships, who shares common ancestors with who. That's what makes it so fun.